about thoracic wall. During this time, you have covered the anatomy of the heart, the mediastinum, and the general organization of the thoracic wall. So today we'll be starting in detail learning about the thoracic wall. So this learning which we are starting today, it will not be complete today. It will be split in two. So we'll be learning into thoracic wall 1, and the next week we'll be learning about thoracic wall 2. So with this note, I like to start with, we have seen this image before and we are good with this image. And right now what you are looking at, we are good about this angle of Lewis, sternal joint. We talk about its significance. And now what are we proceeding? We know the true ribs, false ribs. We know the floating ribs and we know their differences. We have talked about the vertebrae. So I'll not be talking about those things again because we are already knowing them. We talk about sternum. We have seen it in our labs. We have seen all the ribs. I hope these concepts are clear. Going further, we talk about that our thoracic aperture. One is above and one is below. There are so many terminologies has been used. This top cover, I'm calling it superior thoracic aperture. And the inferior one is inferior thoracic aperture. As names can see, and you can see it very easily. So there is no rocket science in these two terms. And I'm sure everybody is with me on this. Now, let's start putting up the things that what are the structures who are related to our thoracic wall. And we have done so many things before. We don't know about it, but this blue thing is the lung, which is enclosed in pleura. So this blue thing is the pleura. Right lung is being shown up. And then this is the pleura, which is coming up. The apical pleura has a name. And we call it suprapleural membrane, Simpson's fascia, cupula. There are so many names. And what is pleura? Pleura is the covering of my lung. Like we have learned about peritoneum. Then we have learned about pericardium. So now the lung has been enclosed in that same one balloon, which becomes visceral and parietal. So the topmost part, the apical part, we call it suprapleural membrane, Simpson fascia, or cupula. These are the so many names for the pleura, which is covering my apex of my lung. So these are so many names for the same structure. I hope we are clear with this. Now, the rest of the lung is being covered. You can start. Now this green is covering my lung, and that is my, because this surface of my lung is facing what? The ribs and the vertebrae. So costal, and this is the parietal. Visceral will be inside. We all know about that. And now we are familiarized with this structure. This is the right side. The one who comes out on the right side from arch of aorta is nothing but my subclavian artery. And then we talk about this during our MSK few times back. You remember? 50 years back we learned about. What are these? These are part of my supraclavicular part of the brachial plexus, and this is the infraclavicular part of the brachial plexus. And you can see this M is being formed, which was helpful for our learning. And then we know about this structure, which is coming down all the way, a beaded structure. We call it a sympathetic chain. And then we learn about these muscles. These muscles, when we learned these muscles, when we were talking about brachial plexus. And this is one of my spleniae muscle. So this is the most anterior, so I call it scalenus anterior. And then I'm sure everybody knows about this vein. Yes, this is my subclavian vein. And then there's a nerve which is crossing all the way downwards, and you can see it's been visible here too. Who's that? That's the phrenic nerve. It's one of the chief nerve which we need to know in detail, and we'll be doing it shortly. And then these are the muscles. What are these muscles? These muscles are present between my ribs. So we call them intercostal muscle. They're muscles which are present between the costas. Like my abdomen, there we learn about 3 layers, and those muscles were arranged and we named them according to their direction. Some of them was oblique, some of them were transverse. Some of them were straight. So we given the name recti, obliques, and then the transverse one. So now these muscles are also be in three layers, and these muscles are pierced by these ribs. So now these are, we'll be learning them shortly, but these are right now you're looking at a group of intercostal muscles. So this is the topmost layer going down. Yes, look at it. This is the top layer. Look at the direction fibers. They are going obliquely. We call it external intercostal muscle because this is the one which is on top. And then this thing, external intercostal membrane. Can you see this gray thing? Can you appreciate this gray thing? So this muscle is not reaching to my sternum. It ends at the costochondral junction, and after this point, this muscle continues as a membrane, and we call it external intercostal membrane because this membrane has been derived from my external intercostal muscle. I hope we are clear for this. Going down. Look, somebody has started. Under this membrane, there is another muscle. Who's that? The fibers are just opposite. So that must be my internal intercostal muscle. Are we good? So the outermost wrap was external intercostal muscle, but this muscle was deficient anteriorly when this muscle was reaching near to the sternal margins, sternal borders. And then under this membrane, we have another muscle. The fibers are just going opposite to that, and they are internal intercostal muscle, which are visible to you from this image. And then what happens? There is a muscle. We learn about it in MSK. Do you remember this guy? Yes, pectoralis minor muscle, pec minor. And look at it. I have some more nerves, some nervous structure. What is that? That's my lateral pectoral nerve. We learn about that. It supplies and pierces it. We have seen it. Lateral and medial pectoral nerves. And then there is a fascia which covers it. Who's that? Think clavipectoral fascia. And then it's all been undercover of my pectoralis major, pec major. Do you remember MSK? Yes. So this is my pectoralis major muscle. Then who's this muscle? Deltoid. Excellent. And who this vein should be? Running the groove between the deltoid and the pectoral, deltopectoral groove. This vein should be my cephalic vein. And who this is? Yes, trapezius. And who this should be? From the sternum and the clavicle to the mastoid process, sternocleidomastoid. And then you can see now this space is not empty. There's a fascia here. This is this area is given a name of posterior triangle of the neck. You'll be learning about these triangles when you'll be in second year, inshallah, in the head and neck region. Now, let's talk a little bit about the arteries who are supplying anterior wall, but we are showing on the left side. Remember, they are also on the right side, but here I have to show these muscles. So here I'll be showing you the major arteries which are visible for the anterior thoracic wall. We talk about this artery. Remember, who was this artery? Subclavian or axillary? Axillary. Why not subclavian? Because we learned that the axillary artery commences at the outer border of the first rib. This is the outer border of the first rib. And it goes where? Till the teres major. So this is my axillary artery. It has entered the axillary region. And then this pectoralis minor, who was dividing it into three parts. 1, 2, and 3. And then from the second part, we have these branches. We know there are so many branches. So this is the thoracoacromial artery. It supplies here, and then something goes laterally, lateral thoracic artery. And then there's a nerve which is going down along with the lateral thoracic artery. So this is my long thoracic nerve. We learned that this nerve was controlling the serratus anterior muscle, winging of scapulae. And then who's that? Which is going behind in this area. You're looking at internal thoracic artery, which is a branch from subclavian artery. And you remember, in each intercostal space anteriorly, it gives upper spaces, it gives anterior intercostal arteries, a pair of anterior intercostal arteries. And then in the seventh space, it bifurcates into musculophrenic, and superficial epigastric. And then they are the one who are giving the respective branches. So this is my internal thoracic artery. All books still write it internal mammillary artery. Why they write internal mammillary artery? Because it's close. Look at it. Anterior intercostal arteries has been given in each intercostal space. So anterior intercostal arteries from spaces 1 to 6. You have been explained what happened in 7th and what is happening below down in the structure of the week session. If you haven't seen there, just recall it and revisit that session where Dr. Sadia was explaining about that. And now you can see its branches which are coming up. What are these branches? Any idea? These are the perforating branches because they perforate the muscles and they go under the skin. They don't perforate the skin, be reminded. So below to the 6th, in the 7th space, they divide it into superior epigastric artery and one which is going laterally, musculophrenic artery. Right? It is responsible to give my anterior intercostal arteries from space number 7 to space number 9. Are we good? These are the branches from, these are the terminal branches of my internal thoracic artery. And internal thoracic artery, I have derived it from where? From subclavian artery. So these are the arteries who are present on my anterior chest wall. I'm not talking about the blood supply of an intercostal space. I'm saying what arteries are primarily responsible for supplying the structures which are present on my anterior chest wall. Are we clear? Good. So now we can see that the remaining branches from musculophrenic for the spaces 7 to 9. And we know that what happens with the lowermost part. So now this is the breast tissue. The breast is being located here, male or a female. And then there is a tail, axillary tail. These are important when you'll be learning about the breast, not today. So now we have seen the structures who are related to my anterior chest wall. So let's explore further what happens in the thoracic wall. We talk about intercostal muscles, and there is another muscle which is responsible for breathing, that is diaphragm. So these all are my muscles which are used for my normal breathing, for my quiet breathing. And when I have the forced breathing, those are the accessory muscles which will be labeled further. But right now I'm talking about the simple muscles. So we talk about a muscle. Look at the directional fibers going downwards, like you're putting your hand in the jacket, in the hoodie. So this direction, external intercostal muscle. Remember? And we said that anteriorly at this place, it has been replaced by external intercostal membrane. So they are mostly active when we are inhaling, during inspiration. And these are the one. Are they following the same plan? No, they are different. The direction is different. They are not coming like this. So they are opposite and they are complete till the sternum. And this is below to that. So this is my internal intercostal muscle. And they are active when we are exhaling, when we are expirating, when we are throwing air out of the lungs. So you're looking at external intercostal, you're looking at internal intercostal. And then who's that? Something below. We call it, then we have the 3 wraps, external intercostal, internal intercostal, and then the innermost layer. Guys, this innermost layer is not complete. It is a patchy layer. So you're looking some of the part of the innermost intercostal muscle. So it's basically acting with internal intercostal muscle. It's a core of internal intercostal muscle. And then this red thing is what? My diaphragm. And diaphragm is controlled by my phrenic nerve. And diaphragm is second most important muscle in human body. And if these two muscles, one is posterior cricoarytenoid, which we'll be learning shortly in the lecture of larynx, and the second is diaphragm. If these two muscles are affected, then the life is endangered because the breathing and everything is being in trouble. I hope everything is clear so far so on this slide. Now, who's that? Any idea? Guess. It'll be coming up in the next presentation. Now, we like to see the same stuff what we were learning right now on from the front. Now we are transferring the same information on a transfer section, a cut section. So now on this side, the plan is I'll be placing neural and muscular component, and on this side you'll be seeing the vessels. So now let's put the intercostal muscle. First, what are these? Yes, these are this is my external intercostal muscle, and look at it. Anteriorly, it is replaced by this membrane, and we give it a name. It starts its journey from the most posterior part, but it stops. It doesn't go to the sternum. Then it is replaced by a membrane, and that is called external intercostal membrane. Are we clear? Perfect. Now, this muscle who begins its journey from the sternum and going backwards, the fibers are placed in opposite direction, and it's not reaching completely. So what will happen here next? This is my internal intercostal, and there's a membrane which goes to my rib. And now, what happened? So this will be what? This was my external intercostal membrane. So what do you think this should be? This is my internal intercostal membrane. Are we good? So we have seen external intercostal muscle, internal intercostal muscle, external intercostal membrane, and internal intercostal membrane. I hope we are clear for this concept. And then this is the innermost layer. Innermost layer, we have it at certain places and we don't have it at certain places. So it's a patchy layer. And this is my innermost layer. These are certain fragments of that which are present, which are only at the sternum, and then it's deficient. It's just terminating here. And then who's replacing this? These dotted lines are the communication, the membranes in between. And these are my transverse thoracic muscle. So this was the innermost. Its component is transverse thoracic muscle. So it's only present here. The fibers are going transversely. Are we clear? Now look at it. What is this? This is my pleura, the two layers of the pleura, and the lungs will be filled here. And then we can see the posterior mediastinum, the middle mediastinum, and the anterior mediastinum. Look how small is the anterior mediastinum. This is the middle mediastinum, and there we'll be having the pericardium and the heart. And then here we'll be having all those big tubes, which we have learned in our previous session. So that's my pleural cavity. And now here I have filled the lungs. The lungs are living here, and these are the hilum and the root of my lungs. And this is the heart with the pericardium, pericardial cavity. And these are my costomediastinal recesses. We'll be talking further in the next presentation, not today. And then there we are seeing aorta. It tells me this is left side because we know that the arteries are more on the left side. And there you can see posterior intercostal arteries. Whatsoever is the space, they are given up, not the upper two spaces. So posterior intercostal arteries, they are going forward to meet their counterpart anterior intercostal arteries, which are branches from where, and vice versa, you can see that posterior intercostal veins, and they are going where? Into the azygos and accessory hemiazygos. Are we good? Perfect. Now, my posterior intercostal vein, you can see that it passes through that and it's going under the skin. It's a lateral branch, and we call it lateral cutaneous branch because it has pierces the muscles, and then it's running under the skin within the superficial fascia. So we call it lateral cutaneous branch of posterior intercostal artery. And then this is what? My internal thoracic arteries. If I'm in a lower space, it will be musculophrenic artery. So this is my internal thoracic artery, and you can see that it's giving two branches on both the sides, and they are anastomose. The anterior intercostal arteries, the anastomose with the posterior intercostal arteries. Anterior intercostal arteries are small and posterior intercostal arteries are big, and they have high pressure because they are emerging from aorta and they are just emerging from internal thoracic. So comparatively, the pressure is low here. Pressure is very high here comparatively. So anterior intercostal artery is being visible to you, and now you can see that anterior intercostal artery gives a perforating branch from the internal thoracic. So we are having internal thoracic artery, it's giving anterior perforating branch, but they are not from the internal thoracic artery, they are from the internal They are not from the anterior intercostal artery, they are from the internal thoracic artery. Now what is happening? I have added up a nerve here. We can see that posterior root ganglion, motor, and there's a spinal nerve which runs all the way down. It runs in each intercostal space. So this is my intercostal nerve, only ventral rami. And these are the dorsal rami. They are the cutaneous. Now you can see that this is my sympathetic chain, sympathetic ganglion, and these are my gray and white rami committents. So you're looking at the cutaneous part, and this is the muscular part of my posterior. Sympathetic chain is being shown up here. Look at laterally from my spinal nerve, we have, guess the name. Yes, lateral cutaneous nerve. Are we good? So we can see that this anterior cutaneous, lateral cutaneous, they are making a parallel channel. So it's all across, posteriorly, laterally, anteriorly, we have the cutaneous supply. So, if any small insect, if it creeps on your chest wall, you can have immediate feeling that even you're sleeping, but you can feel something is moving. Who is perceiving all this? These cutaneous distribution is the one which brings these signals to your mind. And then if it's significant, then you wake up or you scratch or whatnot, or you take an action if it's something dangerous. Are we good so far? Thank you. So now we have seen these different branches. Any question, guys, so far? Anything which bothers you here? Okay, so let's proceed further. The same concept which we were learning, just another replication. And you can see here, let me check, people have some question. Chat. Are you writing something? Oh, it's clear. Great. Good job. I really appreciate you guys. So guys, you can see now, external intercostal. It's not completing internal intercostal. So you see, these are the accessory muscle. We are not talking about them today. These are the abdominal muscle. You are looking at the diaphragm. This side is empty, this side is complete, right? So I don't understand the part about cutaneous branches. Cutaneous branches, let me go back for you. Cutaneous branches are the branches which are coming from my internal intercostal nerve. And these intercostal nerve, it gives these cutaneous branches, their job is not to supply muscle. Their job is to supply skin and the underlying structures. And then we have the cutaneous branches from the main nerve. We have the cutaneous branches from the main artery. So this is how we have the vascularity. Let's say you got a scratch mark, you got a cut on your body, immediately start bleeding. If somebody is touching on your chest wall, immediately you have the feeling, you have the sensation. From where it's all getting the nerve receptor, they are connected to these cutaneous branches. And these cutaneous branches are connected to the main spinal nerve. And we all know in the spinal nerve, we have a sensory component, we have a motor component, and this one is for the sympathetic component. Is the blood supply of the ribs from the structure of the week included in the midterm? Yes, my dear, it has to be, Yusuf. Everything, whatsoever you have learned, everything is included. Please stay connected. I'm sure I'm clear. Faris, doctor, why are you online? Because I was told it's online. Now, so this is the external intercostal and this is the internal intercostal. Okay, and this is a schematic picture which really shows you how these muscle fibers, they have been arranged in different directions. This is just a schematic picture showing us the external and internal intercostal muscles and how they are organized. Okay, now what has been done? The anterior chest wall has been removed and we are looking from inside. So you're looking at the sternum, and these are the ribs who are coming to the sternum, and these are the costal cartilages. And what are we looking at? We are looking at this muscle called what? Transversus thoracis. So this is my transversus thoracis, the same picture. You can see it here. You can match the picture here. And you can see this is my internal thoracic artery coming from the subclavian artery. This is the subclavian vein, brachiocephalic, and then you can see this anterior intercostal, and you can see each space, but we are seeing from inside as if I'm sitting in the thoracic cavity. So this is from inside, and these things are matching. So transversus thoracic muscle, you are seeing from inside the thoracic cavity, and there you can see the muscle fibers going in different direction. So these directional organization are really helpful. And look at it, this is the diaphragm. Are we good so far? Good. So now let's go back further. Look at it. First layer, lateral view, external intercostal muscle and external intercostal membrane. I'm sure it's been clear to all of you. And then this is the internal intercostal, which starts its journey from the front and goes backwards. So the opposite direction. Are we clear? And then this is within the rib cage. So you can see that these are the components of my innermost layer. So we call them at one place subcostalis. We call them transversus thoracis. So they have different names: transversus thoracis, subcostalis, and innermost intercostal muscle. So the third layer, the third circle, is not a complete circle. I hope we are clear for that. Now, you're looking from the back. These are more additional muscles, which we'll be learning about when we'll be talking about the accessory muscles of breathing, not today. Now, this table gives you what you should know, what we have talked so far. That an external intercostal muscle, where is attached superiorly, where is attached inferiorly, who supplies it, and what are its actions. Guys, you are expected to be good with external, internal, innermost, transversus, subcostalis, and these lower three, good to know. But these are upper five, must know. Spend time. This table I have derived from Moore. It's not a rocket science. Okay, so we were here. I hope everything is clear. What is the function of transversus thoracis? So this is a patchy layer, Sharif, a patchy layer, which is the component of my innermost layer. And this is just stabilizing this much part. And the function was shown in the previous thing. So now we were here. We talk about external intercostal, we talk about internal intercostal, and we talk about innermost layer. And I have shown you that innermost layer is not a complete whirl, is not a complete circle. Are we good? So now I have made a cut here. I want to see what is happening inside. So this cut, this slit, give me some infos. So plane of section. So that we'll be learning in the next slide. So look at it, this section. So after this section, now I can see the cut ribs. So now I can see how these muscles are attached. This is anterior, this is posterior. This is superior, this is inferior. This is any typical rib. I'm not bothered. Rib number 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, whosoever. Now, let's put, this is the rib which has been cut. Its superior border, its inferior border. Guys, this is an important thing. And there's a groove. We talk about this costal groove. You remember? Costal groove. Now, what is that? This red line. Any idea? That's my skin, period. And this superficial fascia. This green thing is deep fascia. We were learning from MSK so far. Now, this is what? Under my deep fascia. We always have a muscle. What do you think? This is my external intercostal muscle. Are we good? So this is the, guys, sometimes you ask you this question. If I pierce a needle in mid-clavicular line from anterior to posterior, what layers I'll be piercing? So, and then I'll be giving you a reference line. So you can say skin, superficial fascia, deep fascia, external intercostal, blah, 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 whosoever is coming up. But you have to be very careful with the lines. So right now you're looking at external intercostal muscle. Now going further, you're looking at, yes, under the external, we have internal intercostal muscle. Are we clear? And now within this costal groove, we have what? Intercostal vein, intercostal artery, and intercostal nerve. So we have a formula, VAN, VAN, VAN. This is how they are organized from top to bottom. And it goes in each costal groove. And the job of this costal groove is to protect. If I insert a needle, these things will be protected. But if a rib is fractured, they are the one who will be damaged. They will start bleeding. Will be losing innervations. All that will be happening. So we have to, guys, this is a very important component of our presentation today. So you have to be very careful and very vigilant now further. So this is my van. I talk about it. And this is what? My innermost layer. So this neurovascular bundle lives between the internal intercostal and innermost layer. Are we good? So this neurovascular bundle is not present between external and internal intercostal. It is present between internal intercostal and innermost intercostal. If innermost, it has different names. We have talked about that. Now, what is this? This green thing? Guess. Endothoracic fascia. This is not parietal pleura. This is my, yes, now you are right, parietal pleura. And what is that? Visceral pleura. And in between, what do you think? What that space should be? Pleural space, pleural cavity. This gray thing. Pleural cavity. And then this is my lung. So if I ask you this question, what my needle is piercing if I'm passing it through this one intercostal space across this line, so you can be seeing that. It's going through skin, superficial fascia, deep fascia, external intercostal, internal intercostal, innermost intercostal, endothoracic fascia, parietal pleura, pleural cavity, visceral pleura, then to the lung. If you miss any of these, you'll be missing marks. You'll be losing your marks. So this concept is really important, but it's not only for this purpose. The purpose is different. Now, we are looking from a side view, the same concept. Are we good with these labels? We talk about it. This is external intercostal, internal intercostal, and these are my van thing. Intercostal vein, intercostal artery, intercostal nerve. And then this was the innermost thing. Are we good so far? Now, let's complicate it a bit. And then we are looking at this must be my internal intercostal. Excellent. Now, what are these? These are the collateral branches. So we have to be very careful about these collateral branches when we are doing something, and we are shortly doing something. Now, let's go further. Let's see now where is this information will be used, how clinically it will be useful for us. Now, before going to that, let's recap. We talk about these lines. Do you remember? There are so many lines shown here, but the worth remembering is mid-clavicular. And then these axillary lines, anterior axillary, middle axillary, posterior axillary. And then this scapular lines. So these lines, guys, in the thoracic cavity, if you're learning thorax, even the whole CVP, and if you forget these lines, their concepts, then it'll be very difficult. I'm not saying impossible, but it'll be very difficult. So now I'm sure everybody is good with these lines. We'll be using them shortly. We know about, even blindly, that my mid-clavicular line, how it's been related in both the genders with the nipple. So you can see in both the genders. Now, we were here. And now what we are learning in this slide, we'll be learning about intercostal nerve block. And the second thing is thoracosynthesis. You remember I used this term, thoracosynthesis, when I was talking about cardiac tamponade during structure of the week session. If you have seen, if you're there or if you have watched that video, you can see that. This term is really will be used and will be inquired a lot. So now, to do any procedure, I need to block a nerve. And then that area will go sleep, and I can cut, I can do whatsoever. So first we'll be learning how we can anesthetize, how we can make a nerve go sleep, does not have pain sensation. So first we'll do that. So now this is a sagittal section. We know about these layers. We are good with these infos. We are good with these muscles. You're looking at the external intercostal muscle. You're looking at the internal intercostal muscle. And you're looking at the innermost intercostal muscle. Are we good so far? Perfect. And now we talk about this van thing. They are there, nothing new. Now I have highlighted this area. Let's say I have to do some procedure within this space. So I have to, I have two options. First, I have to admit the patient, take him to OR, give general anesthesia. It's a big story, long story. But if I have to do a small procedure, I can just block this nerve with a local anesthetic agent, and this area will go sleep. Like, see, you remember when you visit your dentist, if they have to do a root canal therapy, they give an injection within your mouth, just behind your tooth, and then they work on, they do burr hole and so many things. Not burr hole exactly, but they do root canal things. They drill, they do this and that, and you don't perceive pain. So same kind of practice. So we like to block this nerve. So how we will achieve that? So these are my neurovascular bundle. We are good with this van thing. And this, what is this yellow thing? That's my endothoracic fascia. And this is my parietal pleura. This is my visceral pleura. Why it has been banded that much? Because there is some problem. There is some pus which has been accumulated here. So I call it now pyothorax. If pus appears in my pleural space, I'll call it pyothorax. If blood comes here, I'll call it hemothorax. If air comes here, I call it pneumothorax. And similarly, it will be compressing on my lung, which will be next to it. So now there is my lung. Look at it. It's been compressed in this area. And there is some fluid here. So now look at it. This is something, this is filled with a fluid, and that fluid is empyema, collection of pus in the pleural cavity. What is pus? Sadid. Empyema thoracis. That's the name of the condition. Pus has been accumulated within my pleural space between my parietal layer and a visceral layer. So now the job is take this pus out. You can say put a needle and take it out. What do you think? Is it not painful? Where should I put a needle? That's the main story. That's what we'll be learning in our upcoming slide. So first we will achieve intercostal nerve block. So I make these nerves go sleep, because if I have to cut it here, the person will not feel any pain. Already in pain, but we have to minimize any further, So first what we'll do, we'll bring a syringe. This is a local anesthetic medicine. We will inject a space below. We will inject in that area. We'll push it here. So now this will go sleep. This nerve, we are targeting nerve. And then, so anesthetic agent infiltrate near the intercostal nerve under inferior border. One intercostal space above and one space below. I have to work here. So I'll block here. I'll block on top, as well as take care of the collateral branches. So I have to be taking care of each and every structure. Are we good? So that's a catch here. So now, after making sure that patient will not perceive, how I'll make sure? I'll ask the patient, close your eyes, and I'll put a needle here. And I'll ask the patient, did you feel something? If patient said, yes, you are pricking me with a needle, then I have to wait a little bit. And till this medicine start affecting, then patient will not feel. Even if I cut it with a knife, patient will not feel any pain if his eyes are closed. So now after achieving this nerve block, now I have to go for removing pleural tap, thoracosynthesis, removing this fluid out. Removing this fluid out, we can use a needle, we can use a tube, so vice versa, whatsoever is needed. It depends upon the thickness, consistency, and what we are targeting. Usually for removing air, if we have air, pneumothorax, we only need a needle. But if it's a thick fluid, empyema, you have seen the pus, how thick it is, how viscous it is. So definitely we need a tube there. But that procedure is called, all of them are called thoracosynthesis. Now, after achieving this, we have placed this tube here. Once the tube has gone in, do you think this tube has gone in simply? No, we have to make a cut. Then we have to introduce, and remember, we have not gone from this place. The area where we have to go, let's say this is fourth intercostal space on the right side. So the rib above, the upper border of the rib, I'm going across the upper border of the rib. What happens if I go from here? I may damage, I may cut these neurovascular bundle and I'll cause more trouble. So the safety is the upper border of the rib below, just close to that. So I'll not be in close relationship to any of these neuro. This is the key thing why we were learning all that. So now we inserted this tube in. Now once this tube insertion, this insertion of this tube is called thoracosynthesis. Somebody is asking me, this local anesthetic not blocking or damaging the vessel. Guys, this local anesthetic has to block the nerve because that's the character of that. And damaging the vessel, if you are not cautious, you might insert the needle into an artery and into a vein. Then you can get into a big trouble, because local anesthetic, if you inject in an artery, that will result in so many worse conditions. So one has to be, it's not a job of anybody walking in, somebody who's trained for that. It's the job of our pros, not for everybody. So local anesthetic should be given in a very specific area, targeted area, done by someone who's trained for that, who has full-fledged training. And then you have to make sure, and then once this whole area goes sleep, then you can cut it. Otherwise patient will never let you touch him. And then after that you insert this tube, and that is called thoracosynthesis. So Shaza, I hope I have answered your question, what you have posted on that chat. So now what happened? This tube has been inserted. So do we inject one above and one below the, not the van, one above and below the space? So this is my area. This is the space where I have to work. So I have to inject here. I have to inject here. And then this area will go sleep. And I also do a local thing also in this area as well as. So this will give me a complete relaxation. Are you sure? Okay, guys. So now, after inserting this tube, what will happen? So the chest tube or a wire bore needle, chest tube, usually the dimension is about your thumb. Is that big, because if you want to drain something, then it has to be meaningful caliber. Why do we inject below if we approach above? Because we have a complete sleep, we have a complete relaxation in this area. If you don't do that, the collaterals will be, I've shown you in the previous one, the collateral will take care of this space as well. So to minimize the pain for my patient, that's the reason why I'm injecting space above and space below. So now, once this big volume tube, the big size tube is there, so now this collected pus starts draining out. But now you may ask me a question. When this pus is coming out, will not the air will get in? And now first we have empyema and after we remove the pus, the air will gush in, because we all know the inside is the negative pressure. So now the patient will develop pneumothorax. So how we can prevent that? So for that, it's not that simple what has been looking like here. What we have to do. But first, I'll go for that. But first we should know what are the safe areas where we can inject these tubes, where we can insert these tubes. So the safe areas, preferred site for tube placement. This is the tube. You're looking at tube. How you will determine? Get an X-ray. You need to have an imaging evidence. Then you percuss. What is percussion? Put your finger and tap on that. On chest wall, you can hear a sound like that. That is percussion. So where you can have maximum dullness, that once you confirm clinically as well as radiologically, then you are allowed to proceed. You should. Medicine is not like, I'm so senior, so I know everything. I'm a pro. No, you need to provide an evidence. So now, for the pneumothorax, hemothorax, pyothorax, when we are inserting this tube, 5th or 6th intercostal space, where? Mid-axillary line. I'm sure everybody will be now reconnecting. Where was the mid-axillary line? In your axilla, in the middle of it. 5th or 6th space. Why not above and why not below? That I'll be explaining to you shortly. So this is the site for, no matter I have to drain air, I have to drain blood, or I have to drain pus, or I have to drain chyle. I'll be inserting my tube in 5th or 6th intercostal space along mid-axillary line. Maybe right side, maybe left side. But this is a standard practice. You can do a little bit above and below, but then there are chances. There are issues which are connected to that. So for the patient treatment, every procedure, it should be connected with the safety. So now, and where I can place the needle, even that has certain the landmarks. If say my patient has just air, so I can insert in, but the preferred sites, first we have to determine, let's say I'm just dealing with a patient who's having tension pneumothorax. We didn't talk about, yes, it also applies to the chylothorax because that's also a kind of fluid. So now if I'm just placing a needle for tension pneumothorax, I need to have an evidence, I need to have clinical evidence, both radiological and clinical. And then tension pneumothorax, second or third intercostal space along mid-clavicular line. So look at it. This is mid-clavicular line. This is mid-axillary line. We have to be very careful. And remember, this is for tension pneumothorax. This is not just simple pneumothorax. Tension pneumothorax is a very grave condition. If you don't intervene, it's something like cardiac tamponade. You'll see somebody dying in front of your eyes. I'll be talking in my next slides. So now why we are choosing that? I have to provide you some kind of evidence. Look at it here. This is a condition where air has been entered within my pleural space. Look at it. This is a normal lung and this is my collapsed lung because there is too much air. So Megron is asking if we damage the nerve itself, even under anesthesia, may get affected after anesthesia or nothing. If you damage anything, it will give you trouble. So the best practice is safety. And you have to be, making sure that nothing should go wrong. If something happens, then there are consequences for that. Anyways, so now look at it. This is a condition which I'm showing you, a pneumothorax. Look at it. How much air has been entered in the pleural space, and look at the shrunken lung. This is not a normal lung. This is a normal size of the lung. And this lung is now because we have too much air, which is placed in my pleural space, and this lung is shrunken. So now this is where we have to intervene. So when we are intervening, now guys, there is a mistake in our book, Moore. If you look at this image, we talk about insertion of chest tube. Insertion of chest tube. He's writing 9th rib. If he's 9th rib, 10th rib. So this is the 9th intercostal space. So this is a typo error. I'm not blaming him. The 9th rib and 10th rib, look at it. Under the same image, you can read this. A short incision is made in the 5th or 6th intercostal space in the mid-axillary line. So the write-up is right, but the picture, they have labeled it wrong. So please clear it in your minds. Now, why we are not injecting at this place? That's the second question. I hope we are clear for that, because when you go to the blue boxes, you'll see this image. It's labeled like that. But when you go for the write-up, which is just written underneath, it's right. This writing is perfect, but this image has something wrong. Now, we are here. If I like to place my tube here, needle can go, that's not a problem. But for the tube, this is the same place. Are we good? So now if I put my tube here, how much space I'm having? Diaphragm is in front. Liver is so close. So there are fair enough chances. This is my 8th rib. And this is what he's talking 9th. And look at it. This small space. I had fair enough chances that I might enter into these things. So that's why it's been said the spaces above 5th, preferably between 5th and 6th spaces. 5th space or 6th space according to your convenience. And what line? Mid-axillary line, not mid-clavicular line. Now you can see the evidence. This image is targeting here. Look how small is the pleural space. Can you see that? But in the upper part, there we have a lot of room. Here we can enter very easily into the diaphragm. We can damage diaphragm. We can damage liver. We can end up with disasters. That's why it's been said that we should prefer that space. Now, when we insert that tube, we don't leave it. We immediately connect it with this special bottle. And this bottle has underwater seal. Look, this tube is going. There is some fluid is here. It's an ordinary normal saying. So now whatsoever is coming out of my pleural space is going in that. And whatsoever air is coming out, it can go bubble out and it can drain out. But no bubble, no air from outside, even if it enters from this tube, it cannot go underwater and it cannot enter from here. So that's the classic explanation when we insert this chest drain, when we insert this chest tube, no matter for pneumothorax, for hemothorax, for pyothorax, for chylothorax, for hydrothorax, it should be connected to this type of tube. This is a standard, gold standard tube. It has been modified to so many shapes. So this is the current use, same concept, same chamber, and there is a airway drainage, and this is what my chest drain is connected, and it's been, you can see that this is a case of hemothorax, and look at it, it's all been collected here. Are we clear? Okay, guys. So now quickly I'll explain this concept and then I'll close it. This is a normal inspiration. We are taking in and we are exhaling out. This is happening. Now, situation comes. There is an injury. There is a damage from external or maybe internal. So now air comes in my pleural space. Now I call it pneumothorax. With each inhalation, air sucks in. And with each exhalation, most of the air stays, but something goes out. What causes pus to accumulate in the pleural cavity? Mariam, Ayman, basically after tuberculosis and these kind of thing, we'll have this pus. We'll talk about it in our clinical scenario, session. Don't worry for that. I'll be re-explaining to you. So now this is the normal pneumothorax. Air has come in, negative pressure, lung has been collapsed. You can see that the pleural space all filled with the air. There's no fluid. And as a result of that, heart has been shifted. The mediastinum, the trachea has been shifted. But with exhalation, it's coming back. Some air is been going out. So you have little bit time to stay with. But further to it, some situation, there is a wound of injury. There is a valve-like situation. Now, when we inhale, air comes in. So this heart has been pushed, mediastinal structure has been pushed to the opposite side. But when we exhale, no air is going out. It acts as a valve. So this has been pressed. With each inhalation, the air has been increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing. And this will become my tension pneumothorax. And if I don't deflate this, I will see somebody dead in front of my eyes within no time. And what is the treatment? Just take a simple needle. Go from the front. Air is always above. Second, third intercostal space. You may choose any. And just stay where? Across the mid clavicular line. And the moment you insert the needle, you can hear a big, you put a needle in a tire, in a car's tire, see how big pressure the air will come out with a severe sound. So this is what the tension pneumothorax. Once we relieve this tension part, then we can insert the chest drain the way we have even talked about. So what causes the pus to accumulate? I have explained that. Fine. So guys, now can you differentiate the normal respiratory cycle, pneumothorax, and tension pneumothorax? So pneumothorax is not something where you should interact in 2 seconds, but tension pneumothorax, cardiac tamponade are those activities where you should be doing immediately. So why is there positive pressure in tension pneumothorax but not in pneumothorax? There is always negative, because there was negative. That's why it was sucking in air. Air was sucked in and then it become positive. But here is negative. But here there's a valve-like situation. The flap has been raised. So the air which has to go out normally with each exhalation is not going out. So it is being trapped. But with each inhalation, air is more air, more and more and more air is coming in, but nothing is going out. And that's what leads to tension pneumothorax. What leads to tension pneumothorax? When the air which has entered in my pleural space does not exit out. So with each breath, I'm adding more and more and more air. So that will cause more and more compression. But compression is not the killer. Killer is what? Pressure on my heart. Shifting of all the mediastinal structure on the opposite side. Pressure in my heart. What will happen? Something like cardiac tamponade. The breathing, the blood pressure will drop. And everything what we have learned in cardiac tamponade, it's something like that sort of thing. So we have to deflate it in a quick action. Once this air is being drained, then we are fine. Are we good? I'll spend more time on that. Don't worry for this. Okay, guys. So now the diaphragm. I'll not talk about diaphragm today because I think we are done with the time and I'm only having 5-6 minutes. So if there is any other question, I like to take your questions, guys. I'm leaving the diaphragm part here. What causes, Momo is asking, what causes the one-way valve? One-way valve, if the wound of entry is like that there is a flap has been raised. So this flap, with each inhalation, the air goes in, and then when we are exhaling, this flap come and oppose this rented part, and it don't allow the air to get out. Like here, air was going out, but here nothing going out. So this one, like, in the veins, the blood can flow in one direction, but if blood tries to flow in the opposite direction, it cannot, because it's designed like that. So because of that, guys, am I able to answer your questions? Is there any, and I know there will be a lot of questions, and today when you'll be spending time, after that you'll be reading, so you'll be understanding a lot, and this is one of the main tasks. So what damage does pneumothorax cause? Pneumothorax causes compression of the lung, so my lung will not be expanding. I have less gaseous exchange, and that will be, if I don't treat it, then I'm living with one lung. But here you have some time. But here in tension pneumothorax, like cardiac tamponade, you don't have time. You have to rush in because somebody is turning blue and gone. Pneumothorax, fine, you have 15, 20, 30 minutes. You can spend time, you can prepare, you can organize, blah, blah, blah. Because here, what are we doing? We are converting this tension pneumothorax into pneumothorax. And then we are putting a tube for drainage of this air. So Yusuf is asking, does the air that leaves into the pleural cavity causes any damage? Yes, gentlemen. This air which is coming in, which is present in my pleural space, look, normally there is no air. So my lung, look at it. Look at the status of the lung. It has been shrunken to minimum. And now this lung is not expanding. Once this lung is not expanding, the job of this, what the lung's job in my body? It was basically for gas exchange. So if the 50% of gases exchange is not happening, then you can think yourself. Is the treatment the same in both pneumothorax and tension pneumothorax? Since it has one-way valve. Look, lean. In tension pneumothorax, we have one-way valve. In pneumothorax, we don't have one-way valve. You can see that the air is going in and with each exhalation also going out of your wound of entry. But here, nothing is going out. So first, we press the needle, we release this extra air, which is been causing, because see, with each breath in, it's shifted, but then it's coming back. But here, it's never coming back. So that's what is happening. In pneumothorax, can the air compress the heart? Yes, it does, but not to that grave extent. We have little bit time, but in tension pneumothorax, too much. How do you find out exactly which lung is collapsed? Amin Dada, if you remember my previous lecture on mediastinum, I have shown you the mediastinal shadows, and you were shown the different images where you are shown how a pneumothorax appears, how a hydrothorax appears, how a hemothorax appears. So if you just look into that lecture, then I'm sure you'll be getting answer for your question. How do you find out exactly which lung is collapsed? So, I mean, you can go back to the radiology, first the evidence, and then you do your clinical examination. So Sarah is asking, can the pleural defect be because of a fractured bone puncture? It could be anything. A fractured bone, a bullet, a gunshot, a stab, a trauma. Maybe, look, it's not necessarily that it's always a trauma from outside. Maybe a bulla got ruptured. You have some disease in the lung, so there is a rupture occurred within the lung substance, so air starts coming out of the airway. That's possible even. Guys, anything else? I think we have reached to the last part. I'm only having 1 minute, so I think I should stop here, and I'm open and available. So we'll be talking, inshallah, in in our lab session. I'll be there to answer your question if you have any. And I've noticed people are finding problem in understanding the organization and orientation of X-rays, right and left. It's always there. Every batch is having these issues. I'll be solving that. Don't worry for that. Thank you very much. Stay blessed. Take care. It's bad time again. We have to be very careful, please. Thank you very much.